Mr. Harris, there's a lot of talk, particularly this week, about the debt and the possibility of a default, which, according to a report by NPR, people impacted by default would be U.S. military veterans. $12 billion as of June 1st, if we default. $12 billion in veterans benefits would not be sent out. $12 billion in civilian and retiree benefits would not be sent out. As of June 1st, $25 billion in Social Security benefits would not be sent out. Mortgage interest rates would increase by 8.4%, $47 billion in Medicare provider payments that are due June 1st would not go out. $1 billion in tax refunds as of June 7th would not go out. $4 billion in federal salaries would not be paid. Obviously, and the economy would be projected to contract by about 5% and a loss of several 100,000 jobs. The U.S. debt is often misperceived as being owned by foreigners, where actually 70% of U.S. debt is to the American people, owed to the American people. It seems to me that historically, in times of world and domestic financial crisis, the demand for U.S. Treasury bonds and bills increases dramatically because U.S. debt is considered a flight to safety. So in times of economic uncertainty, both for the American people and for the world economy, U.S. debt's kind of a good thing. Why is it so vilified when, in fact, it's deemed to be the safest asset in the world, backed by the full faith and credit of the United States? Can you reconcile those?
So I agree wholeheartedly that we have benefited from U.S. debt being seen as a risk-free asset. And in fact, our financial system, not just the United States, but the world, is based on this. And what I worry about so much about the current debt ceiling impasse is we're on the cusp of possibly seeing the world view U.S. debt as going from risk-free to being a risky asset. And we don't know the implications for that. And you could have a repricing of really every asset in the country, not just Treasury debt, but also every home, every piece of stock that you own, every investment that you make. I mean, we could just be throwing an incredible match on gasoline right now as we see Treasuries go from risk-free assets to being risky assets. We just don't know what would happen. It's incredibly dangerous.
Yeah, our friends on the other side are, very quick to point to the fact that they don't want to adversely impact Social Security, for example. So right now, there's a Social Security trust fund of $2.8 trillion. As I understand it, that's the money that is paid into the system through Federal Insurance Contributions Act that are not paid out to beneficiaries. So we're still in a surplus situation. I understand further is that by law, those surpluses have to be invested in U.S. Treasury and bonds. If you're really interested in preserving and expanding and improving Social Security, aren't you putting that very program at risk by not raising the debt ceiling and potentially putting the United States in default for the first time in its history?
Absolutely. So Social Security makes regular payments to beneficiaries. We have planned payments the first few days in June for some of the lowest income beneficiaries, and then regular payments on June 14th, June 21st, June 28th. If these people don't get their payments, and each Wednesday, the second, third, and fourth Wednesday in each month, about 20 million older Americans get these payments, and they rely on them, and they depend on them to come on the exact day that they're promised. Out of those 20 million older Americans who rely on Social Security, about half, about 10 million, are pretty much living paycheck to paycheck. And if this debt ceiling impasse means that they don't get their money, you're going to see real hardship for people. I mean, these are older Americans going hungry that have no other option. It is an absolute catastrophe for people who've worked their whole lives and who are depending on Social Security.
My time is near expiring. I yield back.
I thank my friend from New York, and now yield 5 minutes to Mr. Tom McClintock from California.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I'd like to remind my Democratic colleagues that the House acted last month to increase the debt ceiling by $1.5 trillion. They all voted against it. It's now up to the Senate whether to send that bill to the President or amend it and send it to conference. Mr. Chairman, perhaps we should enter that episode of Schoolhouse Rock into the committee record since they obviously missed it. Mr. Holtz-Egan, just some basic economics of overregulation. It seems to me that the prosperity in a free society is created by those voluntary exchanges that occur between countless consumers every minute. I